Hi, my name is Tiffany, and I'm a nomad. I live in my car, and I'm doing a backseat review of a Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin. This is book 1, A Game of Thrones, and we are on chapter 1, which is titled Bran. Now, I'm doing a deep dive as a detective review of this book. I'm trying to figure out all of the who, what, wheres, who did what, who killed who, whose mom is who's. I want to know everything. I have a lot of tinfoil theories we'll end up diving into as we go through the chapters, and I've taken extensive notes because we want to look at this like a detective. So this is Bran's point of view. We have to make sure we're establishing what we know to be true. We can't just go by hearsay. I think that is the thing that kind of sets this review apart, is we are looking at this with a detective eye, because I love true crime as well. All right, let's get into it. Bran, chapter 1, and this is a Game of Thrones. We're just going to do a review of the chapter. So we have Bran, and he is off to see a man beheaded. He's with a group of people, and they're going to be seeing this king's justice done. So this beheading sounds like it is something that is not that's being done out of cruelty, but it's being done for justice. We know Bran is nervous and excited. I just note that that's a little bit odd that he's excited about this. It's his first beheading, and we're told that Bran is 7 years old. So he's a young boy, and he's never seen winter. They give us a little memo that this is the 9th year of summer. So if Bran is 7, he's never seen winter yet. He's a summer child. So they're going off, and they gather for this beheading. And we're told that with this group is Bran's brother, Robb. We have his father, who is Lord Edward Stark. So that means Bran's last name is Stark. We're told they are the Starks of Winterfell because they have a banner with them. Now, this banner has a sigil on it. It's a gray direwolf on an ice field. So that's what represents the Starks. And his dad is noted as the Warden of the North. So it seems like pretty important people. Again, they're off to do the king's justice. So this seems like they're, somewhat important family. Now, there also are a few other people that are here, and one of them is the ward to this Edward Stark, Lord Edward Stark, and this ward is named Theon Joy. He's 19 years old. So we've got Bran at 7, and we've got Theon much older at 19. And a ward sounds like someone who's helps this Lord Edward Stark out, kind of like an assistant. So at this beheading, they get ready to kill a man. They're gonna chop his head off. And the man that they're killing is dressed all in black. He's noted as a deserter of the Night's Watch, and an oath breaker. So if you go back to the first video I made, that's the prologue. That's what we discussed in our first video. We know we just left Men of the Night's Watch. So I suggest you start from the beginning and go back to that prologue. But here they're about to behead one. So it kind of follows in line with what we just learned about in the prologue. Now, the man that they're going to behead, he's dressed all in black, and he's lost 2 ears to frostbite. So putting 2 and 2 together, I'm thinking that's Garrett. That's Garrett, who we just left off in the prologue. Garrett had lost 2 ears to frostbite. He was a man of the Night's Watch, and he was the one with the horses. So I'm kind of thinking this might be Garrett that they're about to behead. And they're saying they're beheading him because he broke his oath and ran away from the Night's Watch. He is now what's considered, south of the Wall. He's a man of the Night's Watch. He should have never left the Wall. So they're saying he's a deserter. And unfortunately, King's Justice, when you're a deserter of the Night's Watch, means you're beheaded. That's what they're there to do today. They found him. He deserted the Wall. He broke his oath. They're listening. That's one of the things that Edward Stark is doing before this beheading. They're listening to why he ran off, but ultimately he's gonna get beheaded. So Edward Stark has his ward, Theon Joy, his assistant, grab his sword so he can behead this oathbreaker, this deserter of the Night's Watch. Now I want to talk a little bit about this sword that he grabs. So Lord Edward Stark's sword, the Winterfell sword, it's made of Valyrian steel. It has a name. It's called Ice. The sword is so badass, it has a name. So Valyrian steel means it's spell forged and it's dark as smoke. But it's also as wide as a man's hand, and it's taller than Bran's oldest brother, Robb. That's how it's described by Bran. That's pretty tall. I can't imagine that's a giant sword. And it's named Ice. So the ward Theon Greyjoy, he brings the sword over to Lord Edward Stark, and he does the King's Justice, and he's gonna behead this man. So right before the beheading, we are introduced to another brother of Bran's. This one is named Jon Snow. But he's a bastard brother. He's not a true born brother. And we're told Jon Snow is 14 years old. So he's, that's a 7-year difference between Bran. He's much older. And Jon Snow has gray, black eyes. Like, so dark gray that they almost look black. So Jon's telling him, hey, you've got to get this together. Grab your reins and don't look away, because father will know if you do. He's kind of giving him advice because this is his first beheading on what's about to happen. So Bran listens. He takes that advice, and it's a good thing he did, because there was a horse that reared, and he was ready for it, and he didn't look away, and the man was beheaded. Now, the book gets into some gruesome details. Like, they talk about how the head rolls towards Theon Greyjoy, the ward, and Theon laughs and kicks the head. So it's kind of giving a little bit of insight from Bran's view of what Theon Greyjoy is like. he describes him as he finds everything amusing. Sounds like not such a great guy in my eyes. But that's just what we're seeing from Bran's eyes. So after the actual beheading, they end up kind of taking off, and they're, I guess, heading back home. And his dad, the Lord Edward Stark, approaches him. And he's just like, hey, how did you take that? Are you doing okay? He's kind of asking his son, which I think is, fatherly. It's his son's first beheading. He's kind of wanting to know, hey, are you okay? And, Bran's telling him, well, I had a discussion with my brothers, and Jon Snow says the man was dead of fear. And he wonders, which I think this is one of the great lines from the book, Bran wonders, can a man still be brave if he's afraid? And his dad answers, that is the only time a man can be brave. And that, I've noted that was just like one of my favorite kind of quotes from the book in general. It's just such a great quote, and that's right there in the first chapter, Bran. So they're just kind of, father-son discussing what just happened. And he's talked about why he had to do it. And he's saying, well, the man was an oath breaker, and he was, I guess a lot of these oath breakers, they end up turning into maybe what we learned in chapter 1 are wildings. And wildings, through many stories, like Old Nan being one of them. It sounds like this grandma kind of character at this Stark home. She tells stories about wildings that came across the wall and steal children and roam with giants and ghouls. They're slaves, they're thieves, they lay with the others to conceive children. It's kind of all of these really wild, bad stories. And also, Old Nan's talked about the king beyond the wall, that there's some sort of king out there. His name is Mance Rayder, and he, is the king of these wildings. And, he may have sent over this oathbreaker to come thieve or steal or get some sort of information. They're kind of theorizing, and everything they're saying about Garrett, the man they had to behead, it sounds bad. It sounds, they're just trying to protect themselves, and that's why this is King's justice, that these people would come into their communities and just cause some sort of havoc. So that was why they had to do the King's justice. But then he also says, again, this is Lord Edward Stark talking to his son Bran, that the man who passes the sentence should be the one that swings the sword. And I think that's another key piece of advice. You kind of get a feeling that this Lord Edward Stark is a very decent man. He is intentional. He thinks about what he's doing. He has a purpose behind it. So I want to keep in mind, though, this is Bran's chapter, so this is also his dad. And, boys worship their fathers. So we're getting this kind of point of view through his eyes. We have to keep that in mind. Now, Lord Edward Stark is only 35 years old. When they describe him, Bran says he has long brown hair, he has kind of a grayish beard, and he has gray eyes. If we're looking at his brother, though, Bran and his oldest brother, Rob. Again, these are true-born brothers. They have the same mom. They're the actual true-born kids. They have what's called, he names as Tully resemblance, which Tully must be his mom's side of the family, and they're reddish brown hair, muscular, fair. We don't hear how old Rob is, and I'm taking note of that. I think that's kind of odd. The only thing they tell us is he's of the same age as Jon, and Jon, the bastard, is 14 years old. So I'm curious about the lineup there. Like, I don't know in the timeline if Rob is older than Jon Snow at this time. We're just told that he is of the same age as Jon Snow, the bastard son. So the kids right now, we've got Bran, Rob, and Jon. They're all the kids of this Edward Stark. And Jon is the only one right now that says that he looks like Edward Stark. The other ones must look like the mom, Bran and Rob. So we've done the beheading, and as we continue on the way home, Bran and Edward are finishing their fatherly talk. Bran's oldest brother, Rob, rolls up. It was actually Bastard Jon Snow rolls up and says, Rob found something. Come on, guys, hurry up. Rob found something. So that was the keynote too, that Rob found these. And what did Rob find? He found direwolf pups. So they're on their way home from this beheading, and they find direwolf pups. Where are these direwolf pups? Well, there's a dead carcass, a female direwolf, which we are learning that direwolves are much larger than regular wolves. Bran actually says it's larger than his pony. So it sounds like a huge wolf, and they said that they have not been sighted south of the wall in over 200 years. So it sounds like a really uncommon phenomenon that we're having here. And the mom is dead, but somehow there's these wolf pups. And they're asking, well, how did the mom die? And they had found a stag antler in the mom's neck, and for some reason there's like some silent ominous fear, it's unspoken, but it gets very silent, and it's almost like they're like that's a premonition that this is maybe a bad sign, a stag antler killing a direwolf, because the direwolf is their banner sigil. Like, this is a big deal. Like, that's what's flown on their banner, is this great direwolf crossing some ice. So nobody discusses it, but it is noted that that's kind of a bit of an ominous sign. But there end up being 5 pups, and Bran is holding one, and he describes it as soft and warm. And that got me thinking too, well, this mom is dead. Like, how could these pups still be warm? They had to have, I would think, recently been born is the only way they could still be alive. Because he noted that they had warm fur when he was holding it. So 5 pups, they're discussing about how direwolves are hard to care for, and they can be wild, and they could easily rip off a man's arm. So maybe we should just put these pups to death. And Jon Snow is the one that speaks up to his father and says, well, no, you have 3 trueborn sons and 2 trueborn daughters. They're 5 pups that are 3 boys and 2 girls. You're meant to have these pups. It's just meant to be that your kids get these pups. It's your sigil. It's on your banner. It is meant to be. Like, the gods have made this meant to be. And so that kind of is like almost the sealing fate where the dad, Edward Stark, ends up saying, okay, you're going to have to take care of them, though. You guys have to raise them, all of that. And the kids are like, yes, yes, yes. So they gather up and they continue to head home. Like, they start moving away. They're off. And all of a sudden, Jon Snow's like, wait, don't you guys hear that? And he's like, right there. And Bran is noted that he doesn't hear anything. He hears the wind, he hears the hooves, but he doesn't hear anything that Jon Snow is saying he hears. And Jon Snow ends up going back to where the dead mom lay, and he holds up a 6th pup. It's a male, so bastard born. He's the 6th child. It's a male. And this one is completely different, though. It's albino. It's all white, but it has bright red eyes. And kind of like the last thing we're told as this chapter is ending is that the eyes were red. And Bran's thinking about it, and he's like, well, wait, none of the other pups have their eyes open. Why is this one the only one that's already can see? And that's kind of like how the chapter ends. And that got me thinking too, the pups were warm, recently born, and one of them can already see. So I don't know what kind of timeline wolf pups have, but that seems kind of odd too, that one of them would have had their eyes open. I mean, beyond the oddness of it being white with red eyes. So that's kind of the cliff notes of the chapter of what happened. And now we're going to kind of go back and look at, again, speak about some of these notes, key notes that I have written down. We're looking at it with a detective eye, things that we know to be true. So this is Bran's chapter. So this is all from his point of view. We know that Bran is 7 years old. We know that he is related to Robb. Robb is his older brother, and Bran and Robb look alike. They have what are called Tully features. So Tully is going to be the name of their mom. And Tully features are like red-brown hair. It's kind of what we're seeing here. And I think maybe it's blue eyes. I want to say it's blue eyes. And then with that, we're also introduced to a bastard brother that he has, who's Jon Snow. We don't know how old Robb is, but we do know that he's of the same age of Jon Snow, and Jon Snow is 14 years old. But Robb and Jon don't look alike. Jon looks more like the dad, where again, Robb looks more like the mom. So let's talk about the dad. The dad is Lord Edward Stark. So their family name is Stark. Starks of Winterfell. So Winterfell location is going to be the home of where, they reside. They have a banner. The banner is a gray dire wolf on an ice field. So that's kind of like their sigil, the gray dire wolf. Lord Edward Stark is known to be 35 years old. He has long brown hair, and he has gray eyes. So again, he's more into the looks of Jon Snow. Jon Snow's described, his eyes are so dark that they almost look black, though. We've got, in that family, we've also got Theon Greyjoy. So he has a completely a different last name. He is a ward. He's really a son of a different family that's there, almost kind of, I think, held as captive to help out Lord Edward Stark. And he's 19 years old, so he's older than all of the kids. And he kind of finds everything amusing And he's also the one that, like, laughed and kicked the head after the guy was beheaded. So I don't personally have a very high opinion of this man. Then again, this is all what we've seen through Bran's eyes. And walk like a duck, talk like a duck, right? And then we have a couple other characters that are mentioned, which is Old Nan. So she sounds like a grandma type character that's at the house, and she's known to tell stories about the wildings and ghouls and giants beyond the wall and children of the forest. She has a lot of great stories that she tells over and over to the kids, so that's noted. And then we have a couple other people that are there, part of the winter, the Stark household, and that's Jory. He's mentioned as being the captain guard. And then we hear about Holland and Harwin. Harwin's like the kennel master for the house. So those are a few additional characters that we're looking at for the House of Winterfell. Now, we discussed that the man that they're beheading is from the Night's Watch. The reason why they're beheading him, like the whole why behind it, is he's a deserter, an oath breaker, and they're doing the king's justice. So in Bran's point of view, this is all, like, they're kind of like the good guys, and the oath breaker's the bad guy. From this point of view, like, that's how he's seeing it, that this is a king's justice that they're doing. Bran has never seen a true winter. Now, they're in Winterfell, so this location actually has snow. Although they're below the wall, they're still what's considered north. So it's like Canada. It's like being a Yooper in Michigan. It's crazy. It snows a lot. So although it's not a year of winter, they see snow. But Bran, because he's 7 years old, he's never actually seen a winter, because they're in what's noted as the 9th year of the summer. So this beheading, this Night's Watch Oathbreaker, is suspected. We don't know any of this to be true, but this is kind of what Bran's seen through his eyes. He suspected that maybe he could be with Mance Rhaegar, and we're learning that Mance is a king beyond the wall, like possibly the king of the wildlings is kind of how they're talking about him. So we're just going to note that for now. Mance Rhaegar, king behind the wall. But honestly, we don't know any of that to be true. We don't know that he was a wildling. So, besides Nan, it was noted in the chapter that Edward Stark, their father, liked to tell stories too about people called Children of the Forest and the Age of Heroes. We don't really hear much more about that, but it sounds like, story, like fairy tales that you would tell kids. And I think that we're kind of getting to hear that they think of them as fairy tales, like things that aren't really true, whereas in the prologue that we heard, like the first video we did, they're talking about the others, and they're being killed by the others. Where way over here in the north, they're still in a mindset that these things don't even exist. I don't know any of that to be true, but that's what I'm kind of sensing from the way that they're doing, like, stories, and they're talking about it like it's a fantasy, like it's a Red Riding Hood or something, just like a made-up tale that they tell over and over. They're not seeing this as these things, these goblins and giants and things, as being true. Again, that's kind of just the point of view through Bran's eyes. He's thinking of them as more of like stories. They're stories that were told. So we do have a little bit of insight on how their family dynamic is working. We have a whole point of the story where Edward Stark, the father, is checking up on Bran. Like, they have this like heartfelt kind of discussion, father-son, like, are you okay? To me, that shows that, you know, he's in a well-parented, a good functioning family environment. The fact that this all happened, and then the dad come and checks up on him, and he gives him this advice, like, can a man still be brave if he's afraid? And Edward Stark says that's the only time a man can be brave. Again, I'm just noting seems like that's solid advice. Like, it just seems like we're getting the point of view that these are good, solid people, these Stark people. And Edward Stark, you know, is teaching his son that the man who passes the sentence needs to be the one that swings the sword. And the whole reason behind that, he says, a ruler who hides behind a paid executioner forgets what death is. It's like you have to be a part of it. You have to touch, you have to actually physically do it, so you remember what taking a life actually is, what it represents, because that's a big deal, taking somebody's life. And then, you know, we end the chapter with them finding the dire wolves. So they just went through this whole big beheading, and they're on their way home, and they find these 5 pups. Ends up being 6 pups that represent the sigil of the banner. And then it happens to be that there's 6 kids. It just really seems like fate kind of played out here. And what we know to be true is that the dire wolf died with a stag antler. So I'm keeping that in mind. Dire wolves have not been seen in this area in 200 years. So again, this is very kind of fate that this is happening. And that they end up being somewhat, it seems like, just born, but somehow one of them has the eyes open. And it looks like I did forget to mention that we are told that the 3rd son, because again, there are 3 sons, trueborn sons, and we've only met Robb and Bran. They do mention that there's Rickon. Rickon is the 3rd boy, and he's a baby. So Rickon's the 3rd trueborn son, so that would represent the 3 sons, and Jon is the 4th, which is the bastard, and then there are 2 daughters, which we haven't been introduced to yet. So looking back at who, what, where, when, this is Bran's chapter. He's 7 years old. He is a son of House Stark, Lord Edward Stark, the Warden of the North. Bran has brothers. He has Robb and Rickon as trueborn brothers. He has 2 sisters, and he also has a bastard brother named Jon Snow. We know Jon Snow looks like their father, where Bran and Robb do not look like their father. They look like their mother, which we know has the Tully name, with red hair and, I believe, blue eyes. These are the Starks. Stark household is, they're the Warden of the North, and it's called Winterfell. We've been introduced to a woman named Old Nan. We have Jory. We have Harwin. Those are all part of House of Winterfell. And then we have a ward, Theon Greyjoy. So I believe those are the who. Where we were introduced, this is the Stark of Winterfell. So this is in the north, because he's the Warden of the North. They've got to be somewhere near Winterfell. They were heading back after the beheading. Where we also talk about beyond the wall, that this deserter abandoned the wall and kind of did an oath break. When we're in the 9th year of summer, they discuss that. I think that's what we kind of know for now. So we're going to wrap this up. Again, this was a kind of Cliff Notes, a backseat review of the Bran Chapter 1 of A Game of Thrones. It's written by George R.R. Martin. And if you haven't caught the start of the series, go back and catch the prologue. We'll see you in the next chapter, which would be Chapter 2.